Hello and welcome to Bowtie Life and installment 7 of small space gardening on an east-facing porch growing a tomato. And something has grown since installment number 6. In fact, we tied this string up and there was only 3 leaves above it. Look at everything that has grown in just under a week since we recorded that last segment. So we're going to have to step into the next segment and put this in a pot that it's going to live the rest of its days in, which is very exciting. This is always one of my favorite times, is when we get to see, number 1, what's going on underneath the soil, and number 2, we get to see it in its new home. So here we go. Hi, I'm Bowtie Dave. So the focus of this series that we're recording right now is just on a simple process of growing a plant. And so many times we see so many videos and people getting so complex with farms that are so big, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. And I don't want this to be overwhelming. I want this to be a simple plant on a porch for someone who might have an apartment or a condo. And I'm trying to inspire people, try to grow something, just see how it works, see how it does. And I know people that will grow a tomato on their porch just to have a few fresh tomatoes in the spring or in the summer or whenever. We live in the panhandle of Florida, so our weather is a little bit more moderate here than a lot of the country, but grown at the right time, we can grow stuff just about anywhere. And just the reward of having that fresh food, a special treat, is just, to me, so very fulfilling. And I know there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way about that. Now, this is the tomato plant, Black Sea Man tomato that we have been growing. And based on the amount of growth that's happened just recently, all we did a week ago was we put this string on it just to give it a little bit extra support. And it had 3 leaves above the string. In fact, here's a video looking back at the last episode of what it looked like. And now look at it. It's got all this extra growth on top. It's looking beautiful. Now, I do want to point out, here's one of the very first signs of something that a new grower might see. And it's one of the more likely things that you'll see. You'll notice that the leaf here is kind of yellowing. And the leaves are kind of curled back. Okay, now the leaves will curl one way. They'll either curl back, like this one is curled back, or they'll curl in. Now, if they're curled in, there's not enough water. It's saving itself from drying out too much. When they're curled out, one of the problems is that there's too much water. So, very likely, you might be over-loving your plant. And that is what happens to me very often. But most of the leaves look okay. You'll notice there's a little bit of yellowing on this leaf down here. And that's not unusual. Tomato leaves do succumb to various problems. Anyway, we're going to take the very next step here. And as I promised in the last installment, we're going to be potting this up. Now, first thing I want to do, and I have not pulled this out yet to see what's happening down below, but I suspect that we're going to see several roots growing down the side of this cup. And I noticed, if you'll see here, there is a single root growing out the bottom. And that's normally a sign that this tomato is aching to get out of here. And so, very carefully, we can kind of flex this around a little bit. And it's the soil is moist. It's best to do it with moist soil because the soil will stick together better. But if we just turn this over and very gently let it out, you will notice, looky there. Do you see all those roots? This plant is telling us, okay, I'm ready for a big pot. And in fact, you'll notice here, I was wondering if this was going to happen. It is not root bound yet, but there are a few roots circling the bottom down here. And that is right now the absolute perfect time to plant this up into a bigger pot. So I'm going to carefully stick it back in here. Now, the other whoop, I lost my stick, didn't I? Did Now, I felt that fall out, but I wasn't sure what happened. Let me stick this back in here so it has the support we need. There we go. Now, we have another little plant going in here, and you'll remember way back in the first installment I planted extra seeds in here, and this thing was the extra seed. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this big plant and we're going to put it in a pot. We're going to leave this small plant in here to continue to grow. Why? Because it's always good to have a backup, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to have a backup, and this thing is going to, if this thing happens, something happens to it, we have a bad windstorm, it gets struck by lightning, I overlove it with a lot of water, whatever the jillion things that can happen to this tomato plant are, we'll have a backup still growing. And this thing will last a while, so it'll certainly last until this thing has told us whether it's going to actually live or not. So we're good. We got plenty of time. And the fact that it's that much smaller is actually pretty good. It's good timing. So this is a good combination right here. One little plant, one big plant. So the very first thing is we need to figure out what type of pot we want to put this tomato plant in. And it's sitting up here just waiting patiently for us, but we need to make this decision. Now, you can literally pot this in any number of things that you have lying around. Now, this right here, this is a pot that I found sitting on the side of the road one day, but the important thing is you'll notice down in the bottom, there are drainage holes. And that's the important thing. Make sure there's good enough drainage holes for water to drain out, because you don't want this thing to hold water and become a little pond in there. It will literally drown a plant, and we don't want to do that. So pretty much, well, not all plants, but the plants that you're going to deal with in vegetable gardening are plants that want to have occasional dry soil. Another thing, here's an old pot. Nice thing about this, it has a little cage already built into it. I know it's good because it's what someone used on a green bell pepper one time years ago. And so, you know, you can literally use anything you want to. When I was on my first year in the apartment, when I was growing on a north-facing patio, we had 5-gallon buckets with holes drilled in the bottom. I still have dozens and dozens of 5-gallon buckets with holes drilled in the bottom that I now use in my handyman business for tools, but 5-gallon buckets work. Today though, let me set this out of the way. This is my favorite tool for growing things, and this is a grow bag. It is a fabric bag. It's a really tough fabric. You buy these on Amazon. I think I got packages of 20 of these for $40. They were $2 a piece. But it's called a 10-gallon grow bag. Between you and me, is probably closer to 8 gallons. It's not quite the same size. Hey, neighbor. Hey. And so this is actually plenty big enough to grow a tomato. Now, the nice thing about the fabric is, I'm waiting for my neighbor to photobomb me, but the nice thing about the fabric is it does something a little bit different and actually can grow a better plant in the long run. And one of these days I want to do an experiment that I did years ago where I had, well, no, I'm not going to get into that now. Just know that fabric actually allows the roots to grow healthier, and you can get these grow bags in all kinds of price ranges. It's very versatile. I bought all mine on Amazon. They were just from a Guardszen, I think is what it was called. But I've used a lot of these and I love them, and I have had so much success with them. Now, because it's fabric, they say, okay, you're going to have a lot of drying out. I've never had that problem, and I think it may be because we live in Florida, the panhandle of Florida, where it's very humid. In fact, today it's like 80 degrees right now, but it's humid out here right now. It's high humidity, so we kind of have to take that in consideration. If you're in a more northern climate where it gets dry, or an arid climate where it gets dry, you may want to think about getting a solid pot. That terracotta pot that I just had up here, terracotta has a tendency to dry out. However, this terracotta pot has a glaze on it, and the glaze will typically help hold moisture in. So, the type of pot you use, you can use literally all kinds of pots, and it's not a big thing to stress about. So we're going to use this. I have this filled with, in fact, let me come up here. This is Stay Green potting soil. This is the large bag. They sell a smaller bag of this stuff. I have used the Stay Green potting soil for a number of years. Back when I started gardening, I actually went through a bunch of different types of relatively cheap potting soil, and the biggest challenge I ran into was consistency. I would buy one bag and it would be okay, and then a month later I'd buy another bag of the exact same brand and it'll be sandy, and that's kind of disappointing when you're trying to grow something in the same kind of soil. The Stay Green, it is a cheap product at Lowe's, just a big box hardware store. It is a potting mix. It is a cheap brand. There's a smaller bag, about half this size you can get, and I have found that it just does really well. This 10-gallon grow bag will hold most of one of the smaller bags. So if you just want to get one bag, now this is going to be your first big investment in your tomato plant. It's very, very early investment, and I think it's like what, $7 or $8 for that bag of potting soil. So it's not a huge investment. Now, one of the things that I know I was very tempted to go out and do first thing when I started putting my tomatoes into the soil was go out and buy something called tomato tone. Now, tomato tone is important, but right now, this plant right here, it needs to get roots and it needs to get shoots, green leaves. That's what it needs to get. It needs to get those solar panels out, and it needs to get those roots going down. The roots are going to start pulling up new nutrients to this plant, and those leaves, those shoots, are going to start collecting the solar rays and creating more energy. So both of these things are getting into creating energy, growing this tomato plant. So first thing we need to look at is the three numbers on the fertilizer. Now, I'm going to point out there's three numbers here. 3, 4, 6. That stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Now, the first two numbers are more for shoots and roots, and you'll notice they're lower on this tomato tone. Well, that's because later when we want to get fruits, which we want the last two numbers to be higher, when it's time to start coming up with fruits, we want to use something like tomato tone, but we don't need that quite yet. Now, bear in mind, I bought a big bag. You can go to your local hardware store or nursery and get a smaller bag of both of these. I do like the larger bag because you can see it on camera really well. We've already used this once. This is Dr. Earth Homegrown Organic Natural Handcrafted Blend Tomato, Vegetable, and Herb Fertilizer. Now, I want to point out, now remember on the other one, the last number was the big one. On this one, 463, the middle and first numbers are bigger. Shoots, roots, and fruits. What are we interested in here? We're interested in shoots, the leaves, and we're interested in roots. So this bag of fertilizer is going to get better growth for the beginning of the plant's life. So we're going to actually add a bit of this in here, and just so you can see what it looks like. This is an organic product. It looks like a combination of soot and just goop. It's not really anything impressive, but I've used this for a long time, and I find that it's really great for starting plants off. I use it on all my plants. Now, there are some plants that don't go on to something like the tomato tone, but this, now I've got quite a bit in there. I'm going to use about half of this in here, but, well, actually we might put all of this in there because I'm going to mix it in kind of good in the soil here. So that's actually a good amount to put in this soil. Now, and I'm going to mix it in the top few inches. The nice thing about this stuff is as it gets watered, it's going to actually seep through and get deeper in here. I happen to know there's some soil that has other stuff down below here, but for the most part, it's good, healthy stuff. All right. And I've just mixed it in the top half of this. This soil, it's recycled soil. Whenever you're recycling soil, and you can recycle soil, people tell you all the time, oh, you can't do that. You just got to put nutrients in, that's all. And good nutrients, good healthy nutrients are a good thing. The soil that was in here has good biome in it. It has good life in it. And we'll talk more about biome in another video. But it's good for the plants, and it's good for breaking down that long-term feed so this thing grows. Now, I'm going to do one more thing. You'll notice that the leaves here aren't green as they could be. Some of these lower leaves, which is not unusual, but I'm really a little concerned about the fact that all the leaves are not as green as those brand new leaves up here at the top. I mean, those are beautiful leaves. That's gorgeous. This is actually a gorgeous leaf. It's a little uncurled back, but that's because I've been overwatering it. I've been overloving this thing and putting too much water in here. So one thing that we can do though is, remember those three numbers, NPK, shoots, roots, and fruits. The N, the nitrogen, is for shoots, for green growing. If you've ever fed your grass, you'll know that it's high in nitrogen because you want green grass to come up. So nitrogen is the thing we want. Now before we did use another product, and I'm trying to just kind of introduce you to a few different products here, but before we did use a different product, we used fish fertilizer. And fish fertilizer is a high nitrogen product. It's a fish emulsion. It's a fermented fish emulsion. In other words, dead fish all ground up into a slurry, left to ferment for a while, and then it's sold as a product. And it's very good fertilizer for cars, for plants. We don't fertilize our cars. Mrs. Bowtie is pulling up from work right now. So let me show you what I'm going to use this time. It's another product. Okay, so one more thing that I want to mention. I do use a lot of organic fertilizers. One thing I like about organic fertilizers is it is extremely difficult to burn the roots of your plants with organic fertilizers. They normally have lower numbers. Now this one has a 1400 nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. 14 is all nitrogen. And look at this. This is blood meal. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It is blood. I think it's freeze-dried blood. I think that's how they make it. And it is super duper high in nitrogen. Now, all these brand names, there's no sponsorship here or anything. These are just the brands I use. There are all kinds of good products out there. I am pointing out the important things, these three numbers. Because that's the part that you will want to look at. Now, we're going to be planting this tomato in the middle of this bag. So what I'm going to do, and you can see this plant is about, the roots are about as deep as my hand is. So I'm going to just go down here about to where the bend in my hand is and pull back and make a little hole. Now I did water this, so it's a little damp, not real damp, but I will be watering this more once we're done here. However, what I need to do here right now, and there's oh, what is that? That is not a stick. I don't know what that is. It looks like a little piece of tubing. Okay. I am going to come in here and I am going to give this thing a good amount of blood meal. And there's a lot of ways to get good nitrogen, blood meal, fish emulsion. There are a lot of high nitrogen fertilizers. Anyway, so I'm going to come down here and give a little mix in just to make sure we're high concentration there. And now we have a place to put our plant. Now, let's talk about this plant and get it ready to go in the dirt. Okay, so I did just add a little bit more water to it to make sure that this dirt ball has plenty of moisture. It was kind of drying out a little bit more than I was comfortable with for doing the next operation. But this next operation, we need to get this tomato free from this tomato. Now, some plants don't like their roots being played with. Some plants don't mind. Tomato plants most definitely do not mind. Pepper plants do mind. In other words, messing around with the roots, they get stressed. And so you got to be careful with some plants not to do that. With a tomato plant, however, we can pull this out and we can carefully pull this other plant free. And if and I'm just being very gentle. I'm trying to do as little tearing as possible. But the roots of this plant, see there? Just very small roots, not very big at all. And we're going to just leave this here in the water for just a few minutes. It's not going to drown for the few minutes that we're doing this, but we're going to go plant this growth into this pot that we've just set up. So we're kind of messing around with this tomato and we're trying to get it out of here. We want to do this as gently as possible. We really don't want to tear the roots up, but if the roots fall apart like this, it's really okay with tomatoes. It's one of the reasons why tomatoes are so nice as a first plant, because they can take some abuse and punishment from a new gardener. And I can sit here, I can move it around, I can get things ready. Now, another thing a tomato does, now, and this is unique to tomatoes and a few other plants, but specifically to tomatoes, along this root, the stem right here, it will grow more roots. And we are going to not bury this the same level here. We can actually bury a tomato a little higher than this base. Now, this is called the crown of the plant. Most plants, you cannot bury above that crown. The crown is where the stem meets the root ball. And most plants you have to bury, if you're transplanting them, you have to make sure that the root ball stays either at ground level or hilled slightly above ground level, depending on the plant. However, tomatoes are completely different. They don't care. They are very easygoing, easy to transplant. I can sit here and I can pop off a couple of these lower leaves. Now you're saying, oh, don't pop off the leaves, that's the energy. Well, here's the cool thing. When we pop off these lower leaves, which are going to be in contact with the soil, it sends a signal to the rest of the plant to grow faster and grow more. And so it's actually a good thing. It's a healthy thing for a tomato. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come back here and backfill it. This is called backfilling. And we are going to fill it up as high as we can in this pot. Now I could have dug down lower. There are occasions where if there's no leaves and there's a big long stem, skinny stem, we might want to bury this all the way to the bottom of the pot. And with a tomato plant, you can. It works. I don't really need to do that this time. Now you'll see this leaf here. See how it's on the ground? I'm really not comfortable with that. So I'm going to just take and pinch that off. Same thing with this. Now I'm not going to do this one. I know this one's touching the ground. We're going to do something different with it, but I am going to pinch off this other lower leaf. So now our plant is in new soil. It's in a big pot. Those roots that were just starting to feel the edges of the solo cup are now going to discover they have new ground, new fertile ground, because there's fertilizer in there, there's nitrogen in there, and other things that it can use pretty quickly. So this thing is going to be happy. Now, once this thing is in, the very first thing that needs to happen here is you need to water this. Plants need their sustenance right off the top, and they need to know that they are in a good spot. Obviously, they don't have a brain, but you'll notice I'm kind of slowly watering this around and around here, letting it soak in and letting that dirt, that soil, get nice and wet. Now this can holds about a little over a gallon, so I'm putting a little over a gallon in here. Another thing I've done here, and let me just turn the camera down a little bit, is I've actually added a pan down here. And this is going to catch water. Now this is not Mrs. Bowtie's good roasting pan. This has long been retired, and it has gone to Bowtie's garden, and she's okay with it. But we're going to let water collect in this pan. Now, if you have an old pan, great. I find stuff on the side of the road all the time. Another big thing that I find on the side of the road, you know those plastic drawers that people always throw away? Well, those plastic drawers will be big enough to fit a 10-gallon grow bag, most likely. You can find all kinds of stuff for free. You don't have to spend a lot of money. But look, there's already water coming out the bottom down there. So I'm going to put a little more water in the top here. And I'm going to let that water sit in the bottom. Now, it's not always going to be the case, but right now, remember we talked about in some of the previous videos, we talked about bottom watering. Well, what's going to happen is right now when this plant is most in need of water, it is going to have a continuous supply of water. It's going to be more water down deep, which is going to encourage those roots to start growing down and start reaching for that water. This is a good thing. The closer it gets down to the bottom, the more it's going to grow. So, as I'm pouring the last of my water in here, this plant is ready to go. Now, it's a little floppy right now, and it's gonna probably be floppy tomorrow, maybe the next day. That's okay. It's just getting into its new place. It's just getting started. Now, you'll notice I've got a few sticks sitting back here, and we just put a tiny stick in here. This tiny stick is not going to be enough for this plant when it gets bigger. So, we can use any of a bunch of things to support this plant in the future. We've got a bamboo stick here. These are actually stems from sunflowers. If you ever grow sunflowers, cut the stems and use them as stakes. I'm going to put a couple of these down in here. Now you'll notice I'm coming in far enough out. I'm not hitting those roots. If I hit a little bit of those roots, it's not going to kill it, but I want to do as little stress as I can. I've got another one here, and we can just put a couple of these in here. And I like to do this early on because once this thing starts growing, stretching out its roots, you can do damage to the roots. I've got an old scrap piece of, I don't know, what is this? I don't know what it is. It's a scrap piece of wood. I'm a handyman. It's probably from some project, so I'm going to just stick that down in there. And notice I'm staying kind of away from the root ball. We can do this at the beginning because that root ball is only about that big around. It's only as big around as this solo cup, so we're plenty far out that we're not damaging anything. Now those roots can start growing out, start filling this bag, and they will eventually fill this bag. But it'll fill this bag and grow and become the plant that we want to, and hopefully produce some tomatoes for us. Okay, so I did not forget our stray little tomato plant that's going to be our backup over here. Remember this? That stem doesn't look very healthy right there. This may not survive. It may, but it may not. I did not notice that when I pulled it out. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little water in here to get this thing nice and moist. Hey, remember this guy? This is the star tool of our show. We're going to make a bit of a hole in here, and it's best to pick these things up by the leaves. They will be growing more leaves. If you squeeze the stem and break it, they can't grow another main stem. But I am going to plant this thing down pretty deep in here. And hopefully that will be enough to get this thing. Now these plants, this thing and the other plant, because they've been transplanted, they're going to have a few days of stress. Sometimes it's up to a week. That's not something to worry about. When this thing lays over dead and brown, then we can worry about it. But just watering it in there, and I'm going to pour a little bit more water in there. Now what the watering does after the fact is that it actually settles the soil around the roots so that they can better have contact with the soil, the moisture and everything, and any nutrients that it might be able to get out of there. So it's kind of a good thing to water that right after you transplant. Get plenty of water in there. I've got some soil in here. Oop, there's a leaf in there. I don't want that. All right, so there we go. We have a backup tomato plant, is what we're calling that. We're going to set that aside. So now we're coming down to the end. We've talked about a few different fertilizers. We've talked about a symptom of the curly leaves, that when they're curled back like that, a lot of times that means it's getting too much water, too much love, we like to say. And it is not a uncommon problem, especially with new gardeners. So don't fret over that. I do it all the time. In fact, I did it most of this summer. But we have our little tomato plant sitting in here. In fact, let me turn it so you can see it. I am going to cut this string carefully. I say carefully. Come on. There we go. Very carefully cut that string. We no longer need this. Notice it's staying up pretty good in there. However, what I am going to do is we're going to take some string and we're going to make a bit of a lattice around here that's going to support this tomato plant. And I'm going to tie my same square knot, and I'm just going to wrap around here a couple times. And I like to, when I'm doing something like this, now you can go to the hardware store and buy one of those little tomato cages if you want to. This particular tomato plant doesn't grow that huge. It is a determinate. It will grow about 2 or 3 feet tall. That'll be about it. So you can do that if you want to as well. It's really up to you what you want to do with your tomato plant. I'm trying to give you some very basics. I am a cheapskate. Mrs. Bowtie will tell you that. And I am not ashamed of it. So I will be showing you a lot of the cheapest methods that I have found in the past. As we were in the apartment trying to grow our own food. So I will basically give this, now what's going to happen here, this is going to become future support for the center of this tomato. This tomato is going to grow, hopefully grow pretty big. Hopefully it'll grow about the size of this grow bag. So what we need to do is we need to support the middle of this, and that's all the string I've got now. I can't, I don't quite have enough to go around there. Let me see if I can squeeze a little more string out of here. We don't need a lot right now because it's not a very big tomato plant. The nice thing is we can always add more string. We can always add more stakes as well. So we can go several different ways with this. Coming back here, tying my square knot. I was a Boy Scout, so I was taught how to properly tie a square knot when I was young. That's not a good one, but it is a square knot. Okay, so there we go. Plant is the tomato plant is potted up. This leaf here right now is not offering a lot to the plant. I could pick it off and it wouldn't be detrimental to it. It is touching the soil, so it's going to get nasty. There are soil-borne diseases in here that will affect the tomato plant, and that's just a fact of life. I'm going to leave it there just to get as much energy out of it as possible, and we'll just live with it as it is. So these other leaves are going to start taking off and start growing and being strong. They're going to grow up above this string right here, and we're going to start having a tomato plant. So, and it's going to start eating up that nitrogen and start getting a lot more greener leaves. Hopefully, judging on the way the top of this grew out in the past week, just very fast, this thing is ready to take off. And that's normally the sign that it's ready to go. So that's it. We've got our tomato plant planted up in a pot of any type. It can be a 5-gallon bucket with holes. It can be something you find on the side of the road. Recycle something, buy something new, whatever your budget is, it's all good. I got mosquito floating around my face here because it's getting down to evening. So anyway, that's where we are. I am going to water this just a little bit more. Oh, well, I'll tell you what, it's got about an inch of water down here in this tray. Probably not going to worry about it. I'll let it work on soaking up some of that overnight, and probably over the next day or two. So it's probably going to be good. I think that's everything. We've introduced you to a couple of more products. It's not a lot of products. You can get that nitrogen for just a few dollars, the blood meal or the fish emulsion. If you did buy fish emulsion, you can use fish emulsion for what we did here. It's going to have the same effect. Nice thing about the fish emulsion is that it will it's organic and it'll be readily available for the plant. So there we go. That's the next installment of Small Space Gardening with a tomato plant on an east-facing patio. And an east-facing patio is an ideal place. If you have an east-facing patio or veranda or balcony, tomato can be grown. And we're kind of out here on the edge of the veranda and of the patio. I need to move it out as close as I can here to get advantage of this morning sun as possible. But it will look a lot different next time we see it. In fact, it's going to be a few more weeks until we record our next episode, and I will continue to water it and keep it growing. So to not miss that episode, please be sure to subscribe to Bowtie Life. We put out videos almost every single day. Actually, the next 2 weeks, I think we have more than a video a day coming out. But we do try to get out videos most days, and this one will come up. It's probably going to be about a month until we hit this thing again with another episode, because we're going to just let this thing grow. Keep an eye out for a short. I might do a short as an update in the middle before the next long format video for this series. So if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. You're my hero. You have helped grow this channel, our community, and the community is more than just Bowtie. The community is all of the homesteading and gardening channels out there. We are building a resource online that will be that could be available for a very long time for people to learn how to grow, and it's going to just continue to grow and continue to develop. I know I learned a lot of what I've learned from videos online, and then I use the information I've learned, and I've learned a few things about how things work in my panhandle of Florida environment. So I've learned some more things, and so we continue to grow, and I think that's very important that we continue to grow this this community that we're growing online. So if you thought this was informational, educational, inspirational, or maybe just entertaining to see me sticking my hand down in questionable soil, please click the thumbs up on this video. Share it on your social media. Subscribing, thumbs up, sharing. This is all free stuff. It doesn't cost you anything to do that, but it does help grow the community. So be sure and help us grow. And appreciate you coming by, even just watching this video. If you're still watching at this point, thank you, thank you, thank you. That's, again, another indicator to the search engines and the algorithms and everything else out there that you're actually learning something from this. I hope this encourages someone to grow something. Get out and try something. There's just so many joyous things about eating a fresh garden-raised tomato. For me, the memory is sitting in my mom's garden as a kid, not even a teenager, probably preteen, eating all her tomatoes. And I'm sure it probably frustrated her sometime, but she never let me know, and I think she was happy that I was eating my veggies. So that's a good thing. Anyway, we're heading into cooler weather right now. It is the coming down late September, and we're going to continue growing this thing in the fall, because in Florida that's what we do. It's hard to grow stuff in the summer. There's only certain things that'll grow in the summer because it just gets too hot. But tomatoes for us grow great in the fall. If you're farther north where it's colder, you might be starting your tomato plant in the spring. In fact, starting it at the seedling stage like this little guy right here, a lot of people actually do this before winter even arrives and get it going to this point right here. And if they can get this out after the last frost of spring, that's like ideal, and get it at that point. And the key thing, those roots were just starting to peek out the bottom. They were growing down the sides. They were starting to feel around. There's one little 3/4 of a ring of roots on the bottom. Oh, that's a dream. That is just perfect. You sit there, you saw how I teased it out a little bit. We stuck it all in the dirt, and it is going to be happy. So I hope you have a success with this if you're a new gardener. If you're an old gardener, I hope you're having a success as well. Let me know down below in the comments what you're growing right now, what you're harvesting right now, where you are in your garden. I'm curious to hear. I guess that's it. Have a blessed day.